And now recording. All right. Good evening and welcome to the November 10th Village of Woodbury Planning Board meeting. Actually, the November 18th Village of Woodbury Planning Board meeting. Sorry, off to a bad start already. All right. I asked everybody please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Please be seated. All right, there we go. All right, we do not have minutes to vote on tonight, so we will move on from there. First item on the agenda, timely signs, Heritage Financial, public hearing for ARB review of proposed sign face change in an existing wall sign by Hudson Heritage Financial Credit Union. Said property is located within the shopping plaza at 273 Route 32 in Central Valley and is known as the Village of Woodbury Tax Map, Section 230, Block 4, Lot 4.1. And this was published on November 13th, 2020 in the Times Herald record. Okay. I think I saw the applicant here.
Yep, I'm on.
There you are, Joe. Okay, just quick 1,000-foot overview of the project.
Heritage Financial Credit Union has changed their logo. We're looking to replace the existing sign face on top of the building with their new brand colors. The plaza has currently a royal blue and white policy, which another tenant has deviated from, and we were hoping to get a variance to proceed with a navy blue and gold color scheme, which is the new Heritage Financial logo.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. Natalie, I think you guys just had a carryover on this, right? Nothing.
Yes, that's right. And actually, I think the applicant, described the application very well. There's really not much to it. We had one question about the fate of the existing wall sign cabinet above D'Agostino's. I believe early on in the applicant's submission, they said that they acquired that space and that was going to be the expansion of their bank. So we assume that will be removed, but are just looking for the applicant to confirm.
I remember that from the last meeting. Let me turn on my, let me just make sure. Okay, I do remember that from the last meeting, and I believe the sign box had been removed. The bank, I believe, has been, this is before my time, so this is our first time with Heritage. Do you know if that box is still existing? Because I don't.
It's not there. There's just the one for Heritage, right, Sandy?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. I thought the other one was taken down.
Okay.
I think it was probably taken down because I believe Heritage right now has a slightly larger sign than what the other tenants have. So I'm assuming that that's what, when they did that, that's what they had done.
Okay.
Slightly larger.
And that takes care of our question. I hadn't driven by, so thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any members of the board have questions for the applicant or Natalie? Rick, you have anything to add before I go to the public?
Sorry. No, just that we've provided a draft resolution for the board's consideration.
Got that. Thank you very much. Okay, with that being said, we're going to go out to the public for those that wish to speak on the timely signs Heritage Financial application. If you are able to unmute yourself if you wish to speak on the Heritage Financial timely signs application. Going once. Going twice. This is the only problem with public hearings and virtual meetings. You can't see if there's anybody.
You've got your work cut out for you as like an auctioneer of some sort. It's going to be great.
Final call again for if you want to speak on the Timely Signs Heritage Financial public hearing. Nobody's unmuted. There are no comments in any of the chat boxes. I will make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Cottagio. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Has the board had a chance to review the draft resolution provided by council?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Did you get a chance to see it too? I don't know. Was it sent to you, Joe?
Draft resolution?
Yeah.
I had seen it.
Okay, so you're right.
I'm okay with it.
All right. So I will read in the specific conditions then we'll make a motion on the resolution. Sorry, it's so lit. I'm used to like flipping through like a bazillion pages. There's only two specific conditions on here. Rick must have been having a long day or something.
Yeah, brevity is not my long suit.
I think it's a class you take in college. All right, so specific conditions. No building permit shall be issued authorizing construction of structures inconsistent with the architectural renderings submitted to and approved by the Architectural Review Board as part of this approval, nor shall any certificate of occupancy be issued for any structures constructed except in conformance with such renderings. Any deviation from such renderings will require further planning board review. Is the board okay with that comment?
Yes.
Second one, prior to the signing of the plans, the applicant shall comply with the memorandum of the village engineer dated October 28, 2020 to the satisfaction of the village engineer. Everybody okay there? Okay. Being no other specific conditions, I will offer a motion to accept the draft resolution of approval.
I'll second.
Second by Tommy D. Any question? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much. Joe, have a good night.
Guys, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a great Thanksgiving.
You too.
All right. Next up, nobody in the waiting room. Woodbury Villas, discuss and review the proposed site plan amendment to the phasing plan for a 21 lot transfer from phase 1 to phase 6. Said subdivision is located off Dunenberg Road and is known on the Village of Woodbury tax map, section 225, block 1, lot 33.22 at all. I think I just saw Mr. Barsha. There you are.
Yeah.
You moved around on my screen as people come in and out.
Okay. Well, I haven't moved from my seat, so I'm still here. Good to see everybody. I hope you're all well. We received the comment letter from H2M. I'm not going to repeat the essence of the application unless you all want me to. So I just was going to get into the comment letter that we had received from H2M. I submitted a letter. I don't know if you've all had an opportunity to see it. I submitted a letter this afternoon addressing H2M's comments. And basically, the problem that is there is that if we were to go with the schedule that H2M is proposing, there would be a period of time of at least 2 years in which the applicant would not be able to build homes. This will create a very severe financial hardship. And what we did and what we tried to do, of course, was to propose the bond as security and to assure that this work would be done in a timely way, as well as to stagger the building permits that would be issued. The staggering that H2M has proposed just doesn't work for that reason economically. But we talked about this on our end of what additional security, if needed, could be provided to really make the board 100% comfortable that what's going to be done is what we say is going to be done at the time that we say it's going to be done. And so we indicated that the future phase, which is phase 7, which has 50 lots in it, would not be able to be commenced unless and until the certificate of occupancy is issued for both the gatehouse and the clubhouse. So we're trying to do everything we can to give the board 110% assurance that everything that is promised is going to be done, backed up by hard commitments. But we can't have a situation occur where there's such a long period of time of not being able to construct homes. So we hope that the board will accept this as a substitute, if you will. And I've proposed a somewhat modified proposed sequence of giving building permits at the end of this letter. And the only other point that I would like to make is that we should be on the same page about what is outstanding. There are 23 building permit applications that were submitted prior to mid-September. 11 have been issued. The others are in some state of review by the building department. And I think it was sort of agreed in concept that whatever had been submitted prior to September 15th would be able to go through and be issued by the building department. And then it's the remaining building permits that we're talking about sequencing. So the proposal that we have set forth at the end is to have all the building permits that were submitted prior to September 15th issued upon the grant of the resolution. And then of the remaining 39, have 10 issued when the bond is accepted, 19 issued when the clubhouse and gatehouse foundations are complete, 10 issued when the certificates of occupancy for the club and gatehouse are issued, and as additional security in addition to the bond, that no building permits for phase 7 issued until the clubhouse and the gatehouse certificates of occupancy have been issued, which would mean that unless that happens, the last 50 units, 50, of the project could not be built. So I hope that you will allow that program to be included in your resolution, which I hope is of an approval. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. That's really where we are tonight.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Barshaw. Let me just go to Natalie real quick, if you want to chime
Yeah,
in.
thanks, Chris. So I won't reiterate, well, I will. So the application is ultimately for a transfer of 21 lots from phase 1 to phase 6. And then the other issue that needs to be addressed is the build out of the clubhouse and the gatehouse construction in phase 1. At your last meeting, you agreed to consider the terms for a performance bond for these amenities to make sure that they were completed in a timely manner. And we think that that's important. And the overall goal here is to make sure that all of the homes are not built out in phase 1, where the clubhouse and the gatehouse improvements are forgotten or pushed off to the very last minute. So the applicant set forth some terms for a schedule for calling the bond, which we tried to summarize in our memo in a table format, which we think is easier for everybody to sort of digest, and it'll be easier, hopefully, for everybody to look back on in the future and see where we're at. Ultimately, we really didn't have take any exceptions to the terms that the applicant had set forth as far as timeframes and things like that. We think that the schedule is appropriate. It's not doesn't provide too much of a buffer, but it gives some buffers so that if the applicant was to sort of like default on one of these terms, it wouldn't be uncalled for to call on the bond if necessary. And again, you know, you discussed this at your last meeting, calling on a bond doesn't mean that it's going to happen the next day to get these things done. It's not something that, you know, anybody would really want to have happen. So we think that this gives a certain amount of time that's appropriate. The second part of this is a schedule for issuing building permits. Again, we provided a table sort of outlining what we thought the applicant had suggested and then what our recommendations were. Something that's clear to me is that the applicant is reading this table different from how we prepared it. So essentially where we've listed a line item, so for example, the clubhouse and gatehouse foundation completion, we say recommended 31. So that would be, you would grant another, or you could authorize another 16 building permits be issued after that was completed, not prior to. So that's just how we prepared that. It changes things a little bit, especially when Mr. Barshaw mentions that certain gap where actually it would be, building permits would be allowed to be issued after that foundation was constructed. The other thing I wanted to talk about quickly was the number of building permits that are on file, or the applications that are on file with the building department. That number, whatever it is, and it should be confirmed with Gary before it's finalized in any action that you take. We agree that those should be grandfathered in and allowed to progress to certificate of occupancy. It's nobody's intention to hold up these homeowners, from moving into their homes and such. But we do think that there should be a pause until some steps are taken to show good faith effort by the applicant. And then our recommendation was after the foundations were completed, an additional certain number of building permits could be issued. So again, there's that number. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the gap that was described. So ultimately, the schedule for construction that was proposed, like we said, it's reasonable, but the idea is that this would progress in a timely manner. So where the applicant has said, 2 years from a certain milestone, the clubhouse could be completed, we think that actually could be done sooner. So it's really not that this schedule for issuing building permits would hold up the applicant from proceeding with, getting their building permits. It's that these improvements need to be done and in a timely manner. So if they wanted to pursue more building permits, they should proceed more aggressively with the clubhouse and gatehouse improvements. And that's how I read that, or my opinion. Last thing. The difference between certificates of occupancy being issued and substantial completion. So there isn't really all that much difference in our mind between those two milestones. Essentially, like in normal construction, that would be punch list items being completed. So what I had done in my mind reading the applicant's letter today is kind of modify that table a little bit with those new building permit numbers that were described, and maybe I could read them off to you so that you could visualize it as well. So that one column that reads proposed, it would be 23, 23, plus 10 with a total of 33, plus 19, 52, and then plus 10, which ultimately results in the 62 remaining. So there would be 29 building permits essentially that could be issued in a short amount of time, as long as, again, the applicant did their due diligence to finalize the construction of the clubhouse. So I think that covers most of my comments. Ultimately, how this is formatted is up to the board and what you're comfortable with. That was just our suggestion. With that new proposal, how I sort of just read that table to you, we really don't take any exceptions to that either. Again, the only difference here is how we're reading the table. I think, Steve, when he reads it, he thinks, the building permits would be sought before those were completed, but it's after in our mind. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask.
Natalie, I just wanted to get you to please go back through your list of numbers again. I don't know if others had any difficulty following it, but what you said at the end, I was a little confused about what were these your proposed numbers, or were you describing what you thought we had proposed? I'm just a little unclear.
Yeah, no problem. So that was what I thought that you had proposed in your letter today. So I could read them off again.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to be sure. So your recommendation to the board is the same as what's in your table that was in your comment letter?
No, so we don't take exception to what you suggested, how we read that. So if I could read it again, just for clarity.
Please.
The column that indicates proposed were a number of units, permitted BPs, and certificates of occupancy, because ultimately those will proceed to CO.
Right.
It would say 23 for current, which is what the applicant has represented, that are on file with the building department and also approved total. 23 for the bond acceptance. And then they suggest an additional 10 for completion of the clubhouse and gatehouse foundation. That's a total of 33. An additional 19 for substantial completion of all construction. That's a total of 52. And an additional 10 for the issuance of CO for the clubhouse and gatehouse, which is a total of 62. So in our mind, again, the additional 10, say for the clubhouse and gatehouse foundations, would not be issued until the foundations were complete. So basically the applicant would be at a hold for now until they basically essentially got the building permit for the clubhouse and gatehouse and constructed the foundations, at which time an additional 10 building permits could be issued. And again, and similarly, once substantial completion of both the clubhouse and gatehouse was determined, an additional 19 building permits could be sought. And the idea here is that the whole phase one is not built out with the clubhouse and gatehouse being an afterthought. It's meant to, keep this progressing and built out in a timely manner.
Sorry.
Is it, Mr. Chairman, is it appropriate now for me to respond, or did you want to hear from other board members? What's your pleasure?
I want to hear what the other board members have to say. I have some thoughts, but I'll go last.
Sure.
Anybody, or am I going to go first because nobody else has anything
No,
else?
I have some questions. I just didn't know if you wanted a different order. Natalie, you said, okay, to define substantial completion, what definition is substantial completion?
That's a good question, Sandy. So in my mind, it would be basically everything is constructed for those 2 improvements with punch list items remaining. So it could be, colors, issues with walls, railings, just certain final touches, if you will, to the construction. That could be something too that, and maybe Rick could weigh in if he agrees, that could be further specified in this document so that you guys are comfortable with that definition, and also so Gary understands as well. But again, like I was saying, in our mind, it's almost synonymous, so that those last 2 steps, the substantial completion is issued, and then those final touches are made, and then all the building permits at the end would be open for the applicant to pursue.
Okay.
Let me weigh in for a second, Sandy, just to follow up on the substantial completion. In construction law and litigation, there's actually a fairly well recognized definition of substantial completion for purposes of construction contracts.
Okay.
That the courts of New York have agreed upon, which is essentially that if it's a building, that the building is usable at that point in time. So it has to be brought to enough that it could actually be used. As Natalie had put forth, a lot of times, even though a building can be used and somebody may get a CO, there may be some minor punch list items that still have to be completed, but that doesn't mean you couldn't actually utilize it. So if the ultimate user can utilize the building, then that is considered to be substantial completion. For instance, they could get a temporary CO and be able to use the building, but not be fully completed with the buildings so as to be entitled to a full certificate of occupancy.
Okay. So can we say per that definition?
Yeah, we could define it in the resolution.
Okay. All right. And then secondly, in your memo, Natalie, after that table where it talks about the what was supposed to be included in the active adult recreation center, and then in the
The clubhouse for this phase.
for this phase, yeah, it does say that a pool and tennis courts. So are the pool and the tennis courts part of this as well? For the, you know, the gatehouse and the recreation center?
Yes, in my mind, that's correct.
So,
And then-
okay. So can we put that as well? The clubhouse, the pool, the tennis courts, and gatehouse?
If that's what you wish, I definitely would not take any exception to that.
But I mean, if that was, as I read it, was part of the final resolution of approval as well. And
I
then,
think-
what,
Did you-
Chris?
I think I know where you're going, so finish.
If you could just list those again so that I can get the right ones in the resolution, if that's what everybody agrees to.
Well, I think it should be per the 2006 final, what is it? Hold on.
Resolution of approval.
Yeah, section M, paragraph 3?
3, yeah. And then in that paragraph as well, contrary to what was in the secret findings that you listed in your memo, Natalie, it did say the second recreation center is geared to the senior residents and is located within the active adult section. This center shall, at a minimum, include an indoor pool. So that was part of the final resolution. So I know I've asked it probably at least 3 times. There's no indoor pool in that active adult building right now. So I think that somehow needs to be tied into this and be finished once and for all, because right now it's just a hole in the floor of a room in that building. But I know when we had discussed it with Dennis, he didn't think that it was in the resolution, but it actually is in the resolution.
Yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out. You know, I did not pick up on it, but that obviously I missed that one. So how that's handled as part of this approval, I'm not
Can
sure.
we add that, Rick? Can we add that to the, as far as, what is it, the third one, complete clubhouse and gatehouse foundation, and the conditions, or the section M3 of the final resolution of approval from
But I think-
2006?
I think that it wouldn't really make sense with respect to the foundation, because I think that the pool is, I mean, the one that you're concerned about is the senior one, which already has a certificate of occupancy, I believe.
Correct.
I don't think that there's going to be a foundation change with respect to that to put in the pool.
Well, could we, is
So
there,
I would think that it would be part of the substantial completion.
Yeah, that's what the 19. Then that's when they would get the final 19 building permits, right?
not the final, because there's another 10 after
There's
that.
another 10 after that.
Right.
All right, Common Core.
That'd be
So
part of the
yeah, I mean, if we
substantial
could put it in the substantial completion of all construction, then,
Okay.
and any other conditions that are in that final resolution of approval from 2006. I mean, to me, that should have been done a long time ago.
Yeah, and we normally do, Sandy, as I'm sure you're aware, in these WP3, say that they're still obligated to all of the conditions in the prior resolutions. The problem is that by just saying that, it doesn't give a lot of assistance to Gary to be on the lookout for anything specific, especially in connection with this particular resolution of approval where the conditions go on for many, many, many pages.
Mhm.
So I think that if there's something that somebody wants in there, such as what was picked up here, then that should be included, because the intent of this is, yes, we'll go ahead and agree to you moving around the phasing, but we want to make sure that this subdivision is brought up to the state that it should have been prior to now. So that's
Exactly.
what you're requiring these conditions in order for that to happen. So I don't think simply saying, and any other condition, because I don't think, we will say that, but it's not going to be terribly helpful for the purpose that you want. I think
Okay.
if there's something specific that you want, like we've said here with respect to the pool in the senior clubhouse, if there's something else that you believe has not been done that ought to be done, that's what the planning board should discuss and see if it wants to include in this resolution.
Okay. I mean, admittedly, I haven't gone through every single page. I probably should, but I haven't. So Chris, what do you think? Or the whole board, do you think?
I think
Go
I
ahead.
think these are the big items that are outstanding there. I think it's the things we've heard from the public the most on.
Okay.
So I think the rephasing, I'm okay with the rephasing as long as, like I said, did I just freeze?
You did.
I'm fine, like the rephasing is fine with me. Keeping the grandfathering of the prior certificate, yeah, the entire ones I'm fine with. It's just, yes, we need to tie that section to the issuance of building permits, and I think that will be a good way to go here. Because those are the big things that I've heard from the public in the past. And that was a completely incoherent sentence, and I apologize for that.
I was going to say that these are things that the people have been waiting for a long time. These are amenities that were promised to them when they first purchased their houses. It's really important to get this going. So I agree with what Chris says and Sandy says. It should be included. I'm fine with the phasing, but the amenities have to be put in and moved on. It's been too long.
And I will say, I do like Mr. Bershaw's number 3 point, that phase 7 is held up until these amenities are all done.
Fully completed.
Fully completed. Tommy, sorry, I missed you. No?
No, we're all good.
Rick? Rick? Mr.
Rich.
Katajik?
I'm fine. Oh, Rich Katajik, thank you.
Sorry. Rich?
Rich, you're muted.
Muted, yeah. Still
You're
muted.
muted.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I agree with Natalie said, Robert and Sandy, but you know, I've been on the planning board, God knows, almost 15 years, and I've been on this project from day one. And the amenities are very important to me and the people of the community. And I would like to see them completed by 2021, whatever date the applicant can agree to. I can't see these amenities going on and on and on. I would like to put an end date, whether it's 12, 20, 31, but they've got to be completed by the end of 2021. That's my
So
opinion.
you're saying a date rather than tied into the building permits?
Well, tied into both. I'm saying you can have permits go on and on and on. I mean, this thing's been going on for 10 years. I don't see an end. I mean, when they transfer lots, it can go on forever and ever. So I want the amenities, if they transfer lots year after year, the amenities can go on for a number of years. I want to see an end date, whether it be December of 2021. I want to see them completed.
And if you put in that there would be no more lot transfers until these amenities are completed?
I want to see them completed at the end of 2021. This project is over 10 years. And it's not fair to the people in this community.
If I could just weigh in for a second, as I understand the Natalie's proposal, is that the certificate of occupancy, the bond could be called if the certificate of occupancy for the clubhouse was not obtained within 2 years. You're suggesting 1 year. I think practically, I mean, we have to deal with practicality as well as the desire to get this done timely. And right now we're dealing with normal construction to get something completed within a year these days is not that easy. Certainly in the COVID era that we've seen, for instance, for 2020, I believe it was roughly 5 months where construction was completely knocked out of the park and no construction could occur. We are not out of the COVID restrictions. We're now getting into where COVID, certainly in many parts of the country, is worse than it was back in the spring. So to me, the 2 years makes more sense and gives them enough, but it's really up to this board. But I just would like the board to take into consideration the realism of getting a construction project done within a year, and also considering the pandemic restrictions that may occur.
Yes, we totally agree with you, Rick. I mean, there are so many unforeseen circumstances related to construction, especially with, yes, the pandemic and weather and a bunch of different things. And 2 years is not all that unreasonable. And, you know, the only other thing I'll suggest is where the applicant originally had suggested percentages of building permits be issued at certain times. With this finite number that's going to be spelled out in the resolution, hopefully that will, if there was to be another lot transfer, say, they would be limited to that number. So, you know, if they took 20 more lots out at the completion of the gatehouse and clubhouse and gatehouse foundation, they could only have 33 and that's it. So that's kind of how that stands. So I think that helps in that aspect too.
So that 33 wouldn't matter what lot they were in. It's just a total of 33.
Right.
Okay.
But then don't forget, you know, if we go with the phase 7 not being issued until this is all complete, that ties up 50 lots for them. That's a lot of property for them. So there's a lot of incentive.
They got some incentives.
There's incentive there to get this. We're not talking 5 or 6 lots. You're talking 50 lots. So you're talking, what is a little bit over, I mean, not a quarter, but I mean, plus the other lots that are tied to the completion of, so you're 60, almost 70 lots tied up. I mean, I'm not a builder, but something tells me 70 lots is not something anybody would shake a stick at and walk away from.
That's quite a few bucks.
Yeah.
I think that's good enough incentive.
And I hear what you're saying, and listen, I think we've all got to be realistic. We hear how the governors are talking. I don't want to say it, but something tells me that we're all going to be sitting in our houses for a couple months come Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving and holiday Christmas time. That's just me.
Tommy, I also wanted to respond to your request about no more rephasing approvals until after this is done.
Yes.
That certainly can be included in there, but I don't want to have false expectations. That will be a condition in the resolution. But just like any other condition in a resolution, this or a future planning board can modify that.
Well, actually, I think I'm okay. I think I'm okay with it. I think I'm okay with it with the finite amount of COs that will be issued not mattering what lot they're in?
May I, Mr. Chairman?
All right.
Thank you. First of all, I want everybody to understand, and just to go back a tiny bit, we proposed the performance bond initially, and it was our proposal to give the board comfort that this was going to be done, and it was going to be done timely, and that there was real teeth to back that up. And that has not, we have not deviated from that. When we added in the phase 7 limitation as well, it was exactly for the reasons that the chair stated. That's a lot of lots. And by the way, I misspoke. It's not 50, it's actually 60 lots. There's a huge amount of money that is there that both in the performance bond and in the phase 7 prohibition that will guarantee with certainty that this is going to happen within 2 years. The only thing that I say to you is please understand that the burden that you're placing on the applicant in terms of the issuance of the order and the number of building permits is not going to accelerate this in any way. It's just not practical to do it. And even if it would, and I say this to Natalie, what are we going to do? Accelerate things by 2 or 3 months? There's no significant acceleration that is possible on any order of magnitude. But by backloading the building permits to the extent that you are, all that you're doing is inflicting pain on the applicant and a burden, a significant economic burden on the applicant for no additional security and no additional benefit. It's not like anything is going to happen any faster, and nor it's not going to happen with any greater degree of surety. The security that you have is in the performance bond and in the phase 7 limitation. Those are rock solid, and they absolutely tie the applicant's hands. Please don't just throw fuel on the fire and just inflict harm on the applicant for no benefit. So I would really ask you to please reconsider the things that were stated about the number of building permits to be issued. There will be no greater security given to you, and all that you will be doing is enabling the applicant to do its business. It can sell homes, it can enter into contracts, it can build in a normal course and a normal pattern without there being any risk of anything else being delayed. That's the only thing I would really ask you to please reconsider.
So Steve, I mean, it's certainly not my intention, and I know it's not the board's intention to inflict any pain on anybody, but it is, as the board expressed, a concern that these amenities have not been completed thus far. So now it's time to kind of develop a plan for moving forward. The proposed number of building permits I thought was in line with what you suggested. If there's something that is different, you could suggest that to the board, but ultimately it's up to them to decide.
Sure. The real key is that we front load this to some degree so that when the foundations are complete, that's what we have put in as the real kicker for additional building permits to be issued. And Natalie, you and I are on the same page. It's not before, it's after. So
Right.
once the foundations are complete, then X number of building permits could be issued. We're asking that the way that it's being proposed now is that essentially half of the remaining building permits would await the end of the construction, whether it's substantial completion or issuance of building permits. And what we're saying is, with all of these protections in there, please let the applicant go out, let the applicant sell lots, let the applicant be able to do its business, and you've got the security in terms of the performance bond and the phase 7 limitation, and let us please go on the program that we have proposed that enables us to front load the building permit issuance more so that we can go out and do business. That's really all that we're saying. And I know it's not the intent of the board to inflict pain. I understand that. I know that what you want to do is assure that these improvements and recreational facilities are put in. In that regard, we are all on the same page. And that was the reason why we proposed the performance bond, and we proposed the phase 7 limitation, was to try to come forward and say to you, we understand the frustration. We heard the public. We know that there have to be these things done, and there have to be real hard limits to do it. That's why we propose these things. Just don't kill the applicant along the way by so strangling them in terms of their building permits that they effectively can't do business over the next couple of years in a normal fashion.
Mr. Roshoff, you made the comment that there were 60 lots in phase 7?
That's what I was told.
According to the July 15, 2020 map, there's only 50.
Then someone emailed me or texted me the wrong information. I said 50 to begin with. I got a text that corrected me to 60. So I guess I was right in the first instance.
Yeah, unless there's a rephasing planned already, but no,
we're not looking to do any more rephasing.
Okay, because there's only 50 in that phase 7.
And I think Chris was right, Sandy. 50 is still a heck of a lot of lots. We're not going to leave those behind.
50. All right, so, well, we do got to finish this up tonight because we're walking out of here with some sort of a solution. So I think now with the inclusion of the language, I know we got to finish the numbers and we're going to get there, but with the inclusion of the language with the amenities that Sandy spoke about and I spoke about, we're okay with that. That's not a sticking point here, right? That is spelled out in the resolution. Really, we're with the numbers is what we're gonna hammer on right now.
Who are you speaking to now, Chris?
I was speaking to Steve. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I thought you were speaking.
All right, I forgot to address you first. My bad.
No problem. No, we not have any objection to that, Chris.
Okay.
So just so that I'm clear, the pool in the senior recreation center will be done during the substantial completion of all construction.
It's going to have to be done by the time the certificates of occupancy are issued. Those improvements will have to be made.
No, that
was in the substantial completion phase.
The one thing that makes sense, Steve, and the only thing that really makes sense is that, yes, the pool will have some aspect possibly with respect to certificate of occupancy, but when we're talking about what is substantial completion.
I understand.
Pool, okay.
I see the difference now, Rick, and I understand what you're saying. There's effectively, you're saying that because these are not certificate of occupancy approvals themselves, they don't get a C of O, that you got to tie it to the substantial completion. Right. I think that's where you're going. Okay, yeah. I understand that. Okay, I got it.
So, okay, I'm going to throw this out there, just because it's me. All right, so we'll do seven more. Now again, the board is okay with grandfathering in what's out there already, right? What's either has been approved or what's currently under review.
Yes.
The 23.
That's the 23.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that were submitted prior to September 15th, correct?
Yes.
So the board is okay with that. So we're good on that point.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They can just getting the minutia out and going through the details. All right. So how about 7 more when the bond is accepted? We'll do another 15 at foundation completion, and then the remaining at substantial completion.
So you're taking out the issuance of the certificate of occupancy altogether?
Well, the one building has a CO on it already.
Right, but Natalie had proposed 10 for the issuance of certificate of occupancy, and you're taking that out altogether?
And Steve also suggested 10 at the certificate of occupancy.
The only reason I took out certificate of occupancy because, to me, substantial completion is easily more would have more definition behind it than a CO because no.
Not really, Chris.
Okay.
I mean, it certainly has a definition, substantial completion, that somebody's able to utilize the facility. But certificate of occupancy is a very finite aspect that covers all of the state building code requirements, even if it's able to be done. And I think that you need to have at least some of those lots, and 10, I think, is appropriate, that both Steve and Natalie agreed upon, that the clubhouse and gatehouse, 10 of those would be held back until they actually get a certificate of occupancy from Gary.
Okay. Okay.
And
So
again,
how
are
do
we
you-
putting the pool, for the pool and the tennis courts that go with the clubhouse, where is that going?
Substantial completion, correct?
Correct. So I need a recap on these numbers now.
Would it be possible, Chris, for you to drop the, to have the certificate of occupancy at 10 and just not have building permits of substantial completion? Because I think, Rick, what you're saying is that, at least in terms of the temporal difference, the amount of time, it's pretty close to the C of O. Perhaps what we could do, which would really help the applicant, would be to take the remaining ones and just do them at the foundation completion, so that we have the 23 that are grandfathered, we have the 7 at the bond, we have the 10 at the end of the certificate of occupancy, and the balance are issued at the time of foundation completion, whatever that number is.
It's 22.
Yeah, that would work. That would really make a difference for the applicant, and still give the board all of the protection.
Well,
Yeah,
I think not.
I don't agree with that either.
No.
I think that substantial completion, that's a big issue.
I think that should be heavy weighted.
And so I think there certainly should be some incentive tied to that and some security, because we don't want to use the bond. I agree that, Steve, that the bond is a very good mechanism for if things really go bad, but nobody wants to be calling the bond. Nobody wants to be utilizing the bond. It's a very clumsy process if we have to use that.
All right, so then if you ran the numbers, Chris, the way that the board members are suggesting it, here's what I have written down. I think that it would be the 23 that are grandfathered, 7 at the time of the issuance of the bond, 15, as you had suggested, on foundation completion, 7 at substantial completion, and 10 at certificate of occupancy. I think that adds up. Maybe somebody could double check that.
I think it adds up as well.
Hold on, I think I got 62.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what you should get.
Yes, okay.
All right, so we're talking 7 at bond acceptance.
Yeah. 15 at foundation, 7 at substantial, and 10 at certificates.
Certificate, okay.
And then don't forget, we still have those 50 lots in phase 7 are sitting out there too. Sandy?
I'm okay with it.
Rob?
All right.
Rich?
No,
Okay. Steve? Mr. Bercho, you're okay too with what?
Yes, if this is the board's pleasure, yes, these numbers are, I think, the best that we're going to get.
Rick?
I'm fine with it. We do have something else to deal with, but I'm fine with this.
Can I just ask one question as far as the bond? That, wasn't Dennis going to look at the bond, or does it have to be recalculated? Wasn't he looking at something to see if those numbers were still good on the bond?
What will happen, Sandy, is that there needs to be a couple of things that have to be done offline that will be referenced in here. And that is, although it's going to be a simple phrase in the resolution that the bond has to be in a form acceptable to me, and in an amount that's acceptable to to H2M, Dennis and Natalie. There's a lot that goes behind that. All right. So Dennis and Natalie will determine what is the proper amount of the bond. They will go ahead and work through the numbers on the estimates for the construction, now including pools, and come up with an amount for the bond. I will make sure that in fact the performance bond is in proper order. Steve, this was brought up at another meeting, but I just want to confirm is that there was also a provision, and I've done this before, that should there be a need to call the bond, because that's an additional expense to the village if we have to actually sue a surety in order to go ahead and get that bond to be of some use to the village, that if that's necessary, that the applicant is going to be responsible for the attorney's fees.
I had a feeling that that would be in there. It doesn't surprise me.
Okay. So Sandy, that there will be all of that that goes on behind the scene that's required simply by saying that the amount is subject to the approval of the planning board engineer and the form is acceptable to me.
Okay.
Was that what you were talking about, Rick? That's something else we had to take care of?
No, one other thing. Just let me write this down here for a second.
Who are you kidding? You're typing.
I'm trying to type all this down, yes. The other thing was actually two things. One is seeker. It seems to me that this rephasing and the inclusion of work that was already required and considered in the original seeker, as a result of that, as you've done in prior rephasings, that in fact the planning board simply needs to make a motion that it believes that reaffirm your prior seeker findings and that no new seeker review is necessary as a result.
I'll make the motion.
I second it.
Second by Robert. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next.
And the other is, and this is for Steve, there is a 62-day deadline for after the close of a public hearing on site plans. It's not a default to approval, but it's an aspirational goal of what it should take to approve it. We're obviously going to be a little bit behind that, assuming that they authorize the resolution tonight and it's on for the next meeting. But I would just like for the record, so that it's clear, Steve, if you would consent to the extension of that 62-day time period until the next meeting.
Yes, absolutely. That's not a problem.
Thank you. All right. Rick, do you have all of the details you need so I can make a motion for you to draft the resolution?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody else want anything else before I make a motion? I think we covered this out pretty good, right? Okay. I offer a motion for council to draft a resolution of approval with the terms that have been stated at tonight's meeting. I'm not going to even try to repeat all of them.
I'll second.
Second by Sandy. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. I think that's it for this, right, Rick?
Yes.
I just want to thank the board very much. I know that this has been a long haul, and hopefully you won't see us very much anymore.
One more time, right?
Yes, one more time for an approval and a vote, but that's about it, I hope.
All right. Enjoy your holidays. Everyone. Take care.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to sign off.
All right. Last but certainly not least, Crystal Spring Holdings, 110 Seven Springs. Review and discuss site plan for proposed residential development of a 21-lot cluster subdivision. Said property is located at 110 Seven Springs Road in Highland Mills and is known in the Village of Woodbury tax maps, Section 213, Block 1, Lot 7. Good evening. David, are you representing the client tonight? All right.
Yes.
You want
Hello, everyone. My name is David Nimatko. We're a professional design firm in Monroe.
Saul Ezra from my office is here also. He's worked extensively on the plans and be able to participate more on the technical end. But we're here to present this subdivision for about 54 acres of land in this off of Seven Springs Road. We presented and submitted the conventional plan along with a cluster plan, and it seems to have evolved that perhaps 20 lots would be available for development of single-family homes. We received the comments from H2M and from Nelson Pope and Voorhees. We did get to review them today. And of course, in the beginning of a process, there were quite a few comments. Many of them we agree with, and the design can be revised accordingly. There were some milestones within those two comment letters that definitely would like to talk about tonight so that the design and the approval process could go ahead. Should I continue, or how would you like to proceed?
That's good. You give us your little spiel of what you're here for, and I'm going to go to our consultants, and then we'll go from there.
Sure.
Natalie?
Okay. So yes, this application is for a cluster subdivision. It has some unique code requirements. They're not often proposed before you, so this will be fun for everybody to navigate through.
We bring fun to the evening, right?
Yeah. Yes, so we've described the goals of cluster subdivisions as defined in the code within our memorandum. And ultimately, this type of development is intended to preserve open space and ridge lines. With the applicant's original submission, they provided a preliminary sketch of what the cluster would look like, so you can kind of visualize all of that open area that would be maintained, and the disturbance to the land would be minimized to that cluster. So that's the goal here. We have gone back and forth a little bit with the applicant to sort of refine the conventional plan. So the conventional subdivision plan will ultimately result in the maximum number of lots that could be developed in that 54-acre parcel. And then once that maximum number is determined, it will carry over to the cluster and define the number that will be developed. What we had noted in our memo was a couple of provisions that we think this plan requires to determine that maximum number, and that has to do with slopes, where the remaining 80% of the gross minimum lot area should be contained in slopes less than 15%. There was one lot that seemed to be less than the required lot width. And also the proposed road network should conform to your code requirements for slopes and also connectivity with Serpy Road. Once those changes are made, we expect that the number of lots may change, but it's to be determined. Another thing that I just kind of wanted to bring to your attention, and something that I know Dennis has spoke with the applicant about, this lot was considered for subdivision approval previously. At that time, the applicant went through the process. I think it took almost 6 years to do, and ultimately ended up with 16 lots that could be developed. We've provided that information to the applicant, but it's something to kind of consider how this depth of review could be time consuming, and also the code has changed slightly with the requirements for net lot area, so, and that could benefit the applicant, we're not sure. But having that as a baseline is kind of a good idea to keep in mind. We also have detailed some other requirements that'll have to be flushed out as this application proceeds. But essentially, those are the big points for now. Unless you guys have any questions, that's kind of all I have.
Anybody, any questions for Natalie from the board?
I have a question.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Rob.
All right, Natalie, do we have any cluster developments in Woodbury? I don't think so, but do we have anything like that? Or is there a community nearby that has that?
That's a good question, Rob. You have another part of your zoning map for, but it's a specified conservation cluster overlay district, which obviously that's been developed. I do not know that any have been approved before, but I could check with Dennis.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Sandy?
Natalie, when you talked about water and sewer, you said if not already done, the applicant should perform initial tests to prove sewer and water capability for the proposed cluster lots early in the review process. So I understand this is step one, and then they have to go before the village board. At that point, assuming that the village board gives them the green light on this, at that point, is that when they do the sewer and water testing, or
I
in
believe,
the process?
yes, that's also a good question, and I'm not going to answer with definite terms until I look at the code again, but I believe that's required for preliminary subdivision approval. So it would, as you were saying, this is the first step, determining the maximum number of lots. Then the planning board, you could decide whether or not you think it's appropriate for this site, at which time you would apply to the village board for their authorization. And then it comes back to you for a full review of the subdivision and eventual site plan requirements.
Okay. And then I just had one other question. Under the referrals recommended, now, if it's in Woodbury, why would it be referred to the Kairos Joel Fire Department?
I think I got that from the applicant's EAF, and I think they listed them as the fire authority. I'll have to double check for you.
I think that's our district up there still. I don't think it's Kairos Joel's fire district up there.
My mistake, and we will correct it.
It's,
No, I just was curious because I didn't understand if it was in the village of Woodbury, why would it be in their fire district? But
no, I looked in the county GIS and it says it's our district, so.
Actually, I think that the boundaries of the village, when initially drawn, were actually drawn with respect to the fire district in mind.
the Woodbury Fire District. Yeah. Okay.
So I'd be surprised if it was outside of the Woodbury Fire District, but I've been surprised before.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Thanks, Natalie.
Anything else, Sandy?
Nope, that's it for now.
Tommy?
Nope. I'm good.
Mr. Catagio?
I'm good.
All right, Jonathan?
Or you have a copy of my memo dated November 13th. And I did have a lot of comments, 5 zoning comments, 8 subdivision comments, 5 on streets and sidewalks, and 2 on relationships to other codes. Would you like me to go through them all quickly, or just pick certain ones? I don't know how much, it's a late hour. How would you like me to proceed to go through this?
Actually, I have one question because H2M has 21 lots. You have 22 lots. And Rick has 24 lots on his memo.
Well, that is my first, one of my first comments is that their yield plan shows 20. Their May letter talked about 22. And the subdivision plan shows 26 lots. And they're numbered 1 through 24, and then A and B, which A and B is 2 lots. So that's where I got the 26 is because even though those lots A and B don't front on the proposed new street, they're still part of the development. So there's 26. So my first comment is, first we've got to determine whether the yield plan really yields 20 and whether the defects in lot width that were identified, would reduce it to 19 or whether they're really 20 lots that can be yielded out of the site. But then of course they've got to do a cluster with the same number of lots as the yield plan. Then the lots A and B, we noted that they're they're designed to be 2 acres, where all of the lots 1 through 24 are designed to be 1 acre. And we didn't quite understand why that was designed that way. If A and B were also 1 acre, that would enable them to shift some of their development area away from the sensitive resources rather than push it right up against the wetlands and steep slopes. The next stage is if the planning board would like them to cluster, there needs to be a joint meeting with the village board to do that, and the code sets that out. In the subdivision, one of the things that Sandy mentioned is municipal sewer versus septic systems. In the subdivision code in section 23T, it states all subdivisions shall be required to be serviced by municipal sewer unless otherwise waived by the village board. So not only does the village board hold in its powers the authority whether or not they can ultimately cluster, but a real big threshold question is they are proposing in-the-ground septic for the whole site. And the default is that, no, you're supposed to bring sewer out to the site.
If I may just jump in a little bit here.
And that also is, excuse me?
Hold on 1 second.
I'm sorry, Jonathan. I did want to just clarify one thing about that portion of the code. So I believe it references where municipal water and sewer are available. And in this case, they are not, which I did discuss this with Dennis, and we can look into it further. And I'm sure that Rick could provide his expertise as well. But I believe that in this case, that village board waiver would not be required, and the applicant would pursue with individual well and septic systems.
Agreed.
Okay. Then I noted that in terms of fire protection, that there isn't any water source. They may need to design a dry hydrant or other, with a dry hydrant with a water source in order to provide fire protection for the development. The proposed road, there are several places in the code that talks about 1,200 feet as a maximum length for a cul-de-sac street and requirements for connection to other streets. And we also noted that Serpy Road connection was shown in an earlier set of drawings and was done, I think, in that earlier approval. So we would suggest that they try to develop that rather than ask for a waiver for cul-de-sac length, because the proposed cul-de-sac in their drawing currently is at 1,900 feet. And we noted that there are some lots that seem very steep. And one lot in particular has a large 150-foot long, 35-foot wide ledge outcrop right where the driveway is going through on the drawing. And those are the type of features that you're supposed to try to move back from in a cluster development. Also, there are no sidewalks proposed. And with this many lots and in this day and age, we would assume that there will be pedestrians, and that there should be some discussion about whether that's something you'd like to be provided along in this cluster development. Natalie mentioned the street grades. There's an area that hand scales out at over 20%, which is way more than the 12% maximum set in the standards. The watershed protection law which is newly adopted, does apply to the stream course at the very northern end of the property and the adjacent wetlands. And that law essentially prohibits clearing and most types of construction in the first 50 feet from the resource edge, but then between 50 and 100 feet, a special permit from the planning board is required. So given the complexities, it could be that in this redesign, some of these distances to wetlands could be increased to avoid that. Also, the entire project site is subject to ridge protection, and there's an identified ridge protection corridor along Seven Springs Road. Just as in, this seems to come up quite frequently, that whenever projects over 600 feet, you have to go through the ridge protection program and assure that the houses blend into the hillside and that removal of trees is not excessive, so forth. So the applicant should be addressing ridge protection standards. So those are the highlights from our memorandum. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have questions for Jonathan?
Jonathan, I think you mentioned about a fire pond. Is that a
Yes.
possibility that could be done?
Well, when you have this many lots, and if you're not going to get public water, the way it's designed, the last house would be 1,900 feet from the main road. And, you're getting pretty far from any source of water for the pumpers. So usually in a case like this, emergency services will want a source of water with a dry hydrant to be able to use. But once again, I don't know if we only were asked to look at this last week. So I don't know. It sounds like there's been a lot of back and forth over the last several months. So perhaps I'm going over something that's already been discussed, but it seems like their input should be needed for adequate fire protection for a development of this size without public water.
There was some back and forth between the applicants and H2M for the past few months. I did allow that to take place because when the application initially came in, it was nowhere near ready for prime time to where we are today. So I didn't want anybody to waste their time in a meeting.
Okay.
So that's the only reason why those conversations took place, is to get us to where we are today. So none of this stuff has been discussed prior to. I think a lot of this had to do with lot sizes and the conservation cluster overlay requirements. That was really what all took place between H2M and the applicant at this point. So now,
Okay.
we felt we had a plan that was ready to be presented, and that's where we are today. So that's the only thing I allowed to have go on in the background, just to save everybody some time. All right, but I guess first, David or Sal, how many lots is it?
So yeah, I can answer that. I think you said it pretty well that we've been in conversation with H2M, and since we originally applied in May, I mean, the plan has kind of evolved since then. But seeing as we have the latest drawing showing a conventional lot of 20 lots that is conforming to the net lot requirements, that's the maximum. And the cluster plan was developed some months back to try and show an initial concept that has that will be edited in our next submission. I mean, now that we know that the conventional plan will yield 20 lots, we'll change everything, including, the EAF and the narrative and the clustered development plan to reflect 20 lots. And that goes a lot into what Jonathan was saying about moving away from the wetlands and creating space for the rock ledges and not developing in those areas and helping with the grades. So it'll definitely be reduced to 20. That is our hard number, because the conventional plan takes into requirements like the steep slopes and the wetlands and the easements that we would need. So that's where we stand. It'll be at 20.
So just to comment on that a little further, yes, the plan that you've provided most recently, and just so the board has it, I think it was a revision date of October 6th, if I'm not mistaken. It was 20 lots proposed for single family homes and then 1 lot for a stormwater management area. Our comments and comments from NPV's memo will need to be incorporated to define that maximum number of lots. So we expect with the revisions to the roadways and that those couple of criteria that we specified about slopes and lot widths and other things may actually reduce that maximum number further. So just want to point that out, that that is not the number yet.
Natalie, what date is that, Matt?
October 6th.
Well, we received the conventional yield, the yield plan or conventional subdivision dated October 6th. But the latest version that we got of the cluster itself was August 31st.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
So, right, the conventional plan was modified after that original submission showing the cluster layout. Further revisions are required for that, as well as to the conventional layout. And that October 6th date is a revision date, Sandy. It should be in the upper right-hand corner.
So, thank you. So Rick, I think this is
Thanks, Matt.
this is a new for me. I haven't done one of these since I've been on the board. I don't think anybody has on this board yet. Is it an either or the applicant can go for, or is it they're staking their claim on a cluster, and we've got to think it's okay for clustering?
There's a couple of things. I'll answer this question, but then I need to speak to this whole process, because I think it's getting potentially, I don't want to get too far afield from where you need to be. They can go ahead and prefer to have a conventional plan. You also have an option that you could force them into a cluster plan. But they have staked their claim on a cluster plan. I apologize, I misspoke. You could require that, but also it requires the Board of Trustees to weigh in. So the Board of Trustees has to agree that a cluster plan makes sense. The applicant wants that, and the planning board will ultimately make a decision on that issue. Now, both Natalie and Jonathan explained very well a lot of the details of the entire process, especially the cluster plan aspects and what it needs to include, and the process with the Board of Trustees. I really would like the board to sort of now pivot. I think it's essential that the applicant not work any further on their cluster plan and don't resubmit any cluster plan at all. Everything has to be focused at this point on the conventional plan. It is not simply a mathematical computation of what is possible under the zoning code. That's a start, but that's not the end of the conventional plan. And the conventional plan is one when you say, yes, this is an approved conventional plan. That's what will limit the number of lots, and then they can go off and design their cluster plan. But there's no sense in doing anything on a cluster plan until that number is fixed. And like I said, it's not just a mathematical computation. Under both state law and your code, what this essentially is, you have to look at it that they're presenting this conventional subdivision as if it was going to be approved. And you have to decide as to the number of lots that you would approve if it was going to be only under the conventional. So that they haven't done this, but I've seen some other conventional plans for clusters do this, where you come up with this crazy quilt kind of odd shaped lots and ridiculously long cul-de-sacs and everything else in order to try to get the greatest number possible. Triangular shaped lots, octagonal shaped lots, all sorts of things. That's not a proper conventional plan. You have to look at that conventional plan, the planning board does, to say, yes, we would approve this. So for instance, if on this plan, there's 2 large cul-de-sacs, you may say, we would never approve that. So we would only approve X number of feet of a cul-de-sac. And so you'll have to redo your numbers based upon the fact that you're only going to have a limited cul-de-sac length as you determine. Whether or not you're going to have sidewalks may limit the number of lots. The steep slopes issue will be that. Whether or not how they organize their lots makes sense for you if it's acceptable to you. But if you would say under a normal subdivision, forgetting for the moment that it's going to be a cluster one. Right now, it's just, this is the subdivision that's being presented to you for an approval, is the conventional. What would you approve? It's not just that mathematical look at the project saying, well, we have to have so many setbacks, we have to have so much frontage, we have to have so much coverage, we have to have so much lot available for each. It's much more than that. So I think that not only should you consider the cul-de-sacs, whether or not they're acceptable as they're proposed, or giving them direction as you would with any subdivision. No, you have to resubmit with a different length cul-de-sac, or if you don't like cul-de-sacs, for this particular project, sidewalks, water quality protection as far as the buffer areas, that would have to be considered as potentially shrinking the area of development. Ridge preservation, not necessarily the part of ridge preservation dealing with the color scheme and height of homes, but certainly for tree removal, may in fact limit the areas that of disturbance that would otherwise be available to determine a buildable lot. So there's a lot to look at, and to my mind, the board should entirely focus on the conventional lot, come up with a subdivision that, just as if that's all they were putting before you, that you would approve. That then will define the number. They then go and come back with whatever cluster subdivision proposal that they want.
That's a lot.
Well, in harmony with that, that's one of the reasons why we're happy to be before the board, because to continue down with a conventional plan, which I'm happy to say we don't have triangular or octagonal lots. At least most all of ours are rectilinear, so I'm happy about that. But we would like direction from the board regarding the conventional plan and your thoughts with the proposed 2 cul-de-sacs, your thoughts regarding sidewalks, the buffers from the wetlands, I'm not overly concerned about, in the sense that, of course, we're going to do that, and we feel comfortable incorporating that aspect into the design. Also, the connectivity to Serpy Lane, is that something that the board is intent on? Because that would also affect the design, and we would want to know that in lieu of the 2 cul-de-sacs that we show. So those are the milestones that we're focused on. I agree with Rick's point associated with the conventional plan, but for us to go along in a productive way, we would need the feedback from the planning board. Both comment letters allude to connectivity to Serpy Lane. They're not dogmatic about it. Again, it is a planning board decision. The sidewalks are a planning board decision. Those are the major design factors that we would want to focus in on for us to continue along in a productive way.
Well, I guess one of my comments on the conventional plan is you've got 4 lots, 17, 18, 19, and 20, where you've got a cul-de-sac at 90 degrees to the main road. There's this left turn with another cul-de-sac, and it literally goes straight up and over the top of the mountain. And I think that one of the reasons, I would guess, I have not seen the 17 lot conventional plan from the previous approval, but I would say that it'd be almost impossible to design a conforming road at a safe slope and with and to be graded at 10 or 12% to go up that mountain and over the top to access those 4 lots. So that's the type of thing that we're going to need to work on to see if your conventional subdivision would really work as a conventional subdivision, to be fair, to get the number of lots so that if you pursue a cluster, we're going from a fair number that the lot would actually yield if it were a conventional subdivision. And as far as the Serpy Road, the codes that we've cited that limit cul-de-sacs to 1,200 feet really would drive that, I think. Because right now you're at 1,900 feet. And you have a road that you could connect to. I mean, the board could discuss its attitudes about that. But if you didn't connect to Serpy Road, you'd have to be seeking waivers, of that 1,200 foot length. And there was one part of the code that was permissive and said generally they shouldn't be over 1,200 feet. But then there was another place in the code that I cited that says they definitely should not be more than 1,200 feet.
If I can jump in for a second, the board and the applicant has our memo and NPV's memo. So to go over our comments too much further, I don't know that it would be too helpful. But one thing I wanted to just mention on, Jonathan, because you brought it up, that location of the roadway going across the mountain, and the prior plan that was approved actually did wrap around the mountain so that the drive wasn't going directly across it. And the applicant has a copy of that plan too. We could forward it to the rest of the board members just so that you have it for your files as well. But again, the applicant's not necessarily limited to, going back to that original plan. I mean, this is their plan to.
Right.
I do want to also point out that that's a really good point about the grades, especially for that second cul-de-sac. But we did try and take that into account. I mean, I know that so that second cul-de-sac road is about maybe 800 feet, and the grade at the intersection is about 865, and then by the time that you get to the cul-de-sac itself, it's about 900. So that's about 4 or 5%. I mean, that requires, don't get me wrong, it requires a lot of soil movement, but it's definitely not impossible. I mean, it's something that we want to consider as something realistic. I mean, it's not something we want to eventually build because we want to use this as a yield map, but impossible is something we're definitely trying to look at. And that's why, as this progresses, we're definitely going to go through some of the issues that you correctly pointed out, like the rock outcropping and the proximity to wetlands. So that'll change. But as far as the conventional plan goes, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
But I just want to reiterate, I agree, but I want to reiterate that it's a plan, it has to be a plan that the planning board would approve as a conventional subdivision. So if they would say that's too much disturbance for the roadways, then it's not going to happen. When the planning board is looking at this, like I said, you look at it as a straight subdivision, so that if they are essentially needing some waivers from the planning board, you're able, in my opinion, to go ahead and consider granting those waivers in theory, so that that aspect of the plan can proceed. But for instance, you couldn't allow something that needed a variance. That's not something that you could allow, because that would require something else. So it has to be
in the conventional design.
In the conventional design, right?
Can we waive the length of the
I think there's one area Jonathan was talking about that you could waive, and another one, or at least could modify, because it was generally, it wasn't an absolute. And the other one, I believe, Jonathan, you said it was an absolute.
Yeah, that's in the street and sidewalk chapter. It's section 269, chapter 269, section 27B6 in the street and sidewalk code, which is not zoning, not subdivision, but street and sidewalks. Cul-de-sac shall be no more than 1,200 feet in length. You know, so that's our street and road standards chapter. And I just got out my hand scale. The summit is of that hill right by the driveway to lot 20 is about 60 feet higher than the cul-de-sac. And it's about 600 feet up the road. So I'm getting that road is pretty much at 10%. You know, that could be 10% grade right in through there. So to get it down to 5%, like you suggest, I think might not really be workable.
Well, we definitely
So
need the grade
those are
down.
really the considerations we'll be looking at to decide if the conventional subdivision really, you know, would yield as many as 20.
Well, I think the first, being that's a cul-de-sac, the first thing we have to even find out, because we seem to have conflicting sections of code, Rick, right? One saying shall, one saying must.
Yeah, I have to look into that. I haven't looked at those two provisions. I was relying upon Jonathan's memo.
Right.
And
So-
that it also may be, Chris, that you need to seek guidance from Gary as to which is the one that would control your requirements. That's one. But also, again, there's all the discretion that the planning board has, that even if they were allowed to put that in there, but you don't like the cul-de-sac the way it is, then it doesn't work. But I will look at those two sections again that are noted in Jonathan's memo, and we'll figure out together what is the appropriate interpretation and whether or not we need one from Gary.
Okay. Well, because it makes a big difference here, right? You know,
I agree.
I know there was a question about sidewalks. Personally, I live in a development without sidewalks. I can't stand it. I hate having to walk in the street with my kids and my dogs and everything like that. So my personal opinion on this point is that I'd like to see sidewalks.
I agree with that. I'd like to see sidewalks also.
Yes.
I agree.
And I don't think a connection to Serpy Road is needed or warranted. I think keeping this new subdivision kind of contained keeps traffic down, because then it no longer becomes a cut through, right? If you connect this subdivision to another subdivision, what happens? People drive through one to get to the other. You increase cars, and there's not a lot of traffic up there to begin with. I don't think we need it, right? Just me.
I agree. I agree, Chris.
There may be, not to complicate that, but there is a provision in the code that encourages, and it may require connectivity. That's 272.23C. So let's look into that also and just see whether or not that waiver or discretion is available.
Rick's gonna need a new keyboard. All right, so at least we have a consensus on sidewalks, which is good. So we're one step of the way there. The cul-de-sacs, we really can't give you any guidance on, right, until we know whether or not we can say those have to be cut down or not. And then we got to confirm the street connectivity. We may have nothing to say about that at all.
Well, we look forward to those observations as soon as possible.
I know. I know it's kind of like we're getting a lot of nothing back, but unfortunately, these are the things that get flushed out when we start having these meetings. And
well, you know what, Chris, that's important. I mean, our office went through the exercise of the mathematical part of the equation with the steep, identifying and allocating the steep slopes and their areas and how it affects the lot sizes and things like that. And we created a huge chart associated with it. So we have our head into the project, if you will. You know, so we're
And it's
beginning to learn this site inside and out. But as I mentioned earlier, you know, it's difficult to proceed without getting some definitive direction. And I think those 3 points are critical.
Yeah, and I agree with David's approach. I mean, what they have done so far, that mathematical approach, is a necessary first step, right? Because you need to have lots that are complying. But then you need to take it to the planning board needs to take it to the next step and determine whether or not it is something that they would require and would modify, and if so, to give direction to the applicant. The applicant also has to take into consideration some of the other things like the buffer areas and things, and ridge preservation is something they're going to have to get from this board as to whether or not there are certain areas, and you can be guided again by those, the zoning code view corridors as to whether or not you think that there are certain parts of this that need to stay forested, if you will, in order to comply with ridge preservation. And if so, that may, let's say that takes up the developable part of one particular lot, that may make that lot not buildable, and therefore may have to be combined with another lot. So you're going to have to give them some direction on the ridge preservation, I believe, as well, at least as to the clearing.
Well, isn't that where we would do almost like a tree survey?
It really depends, and I would probably rely upon Jonathan and Natalie as well to see whether or not it's something that's so obvious that you would be able to give some guidance without an actual tree survey, or there may be some a tree survey that you may want to require. It really depends.
Yeah, and what you could do, and what the applicant should consider now is showing the limits of disturbance on the plan, and then you can kind of see where those areas to remain undisturbed are, and then afterwards would be that tree survey, I think, within the disturbance area.
Limits of disturbance won't be great. I mean, you know, considering the house locations in relationship to the proposed roads and septic areas.
That's right.
So,
And, you know, and another, just, you know, sort of observation about the cut and fill, the cul-de-sac, the 800-foot one that goes up to the top of the summit and then over the top, the actual cul-de-sac circle, I'm counting like 10 topo lines in the circle. The circle is on the side of a slope, and from one end of the circle to the other is a 20-foot drop. So there'd have to be a tremendous amount of fill to make a cul-de-sac in that location, and then how the driveways would connect. I think another issue that you'd have to look at for the conventional subdivision is once you got the roads in and got them elevated or cut to have reasonable slopes, then you'd have to look at, well, will the driveways be able to get to them from the lots if you've having to raise the road up 20 feet or 10 feet in order to get it at the right vertical alignment? Then how are you going to bring house driveways up or down to it without the driveways being too steep or too workable? So there's really a lot of moving parts to get this conventional plan in shape.
Yeah, it's the same number of moving parts as you would for any subdivision before you. And on 2 points, if I may, both for really Natalie, is my recollection of a lot of these subdivisions in difficult areas. Natalie and her office have provided some advice as to whether or not what's being proposed with respect to cuts and fills and things like that generally are reasonable, or whether or not it seems like it's not a workable plan without going into very specific calculations of cut and fill analyses. And also, Natalie, with respect to, it's being proposed right now that there be individual septic systems. And I realize we're not going to ask them to have septic tests for all of the individual lots to determine whether or not that's workable. That may be a limitation later on. But is there something, Natalie, as far as the general soils in the area that would be helpful determining whether or not the soils generally are acceptable to having septics on the lots of these sizes?
Yes, there is. It's the U.S. Conservation Soil Survey that the applicant can review. And then also the prior subdivision approval, the applicant at that time was required to demonstrate water and sewer capabilities. Things really wouldn't have changed all that much in this regard as far as that is concerned. So if we can find that in our files, that might save the applicant some time and expense as well. So I will try to do that if the board agrees.
Yeah, just to put the board at ease, we do have those original septic designs, and so we based our area of septic field on those previous designs. I mean, it could vary a minute or two, but we do have a conservative allocated area for each house.
Thank you, Dave.
So I think Saul wanted to ask a question. I don't want to leave the meeting because I know he has some technical stuff.
Yeah, I did want to ask, I don't know if it's, I wanted to broach the question because I know it would be easier in some respects to not have individual septic systems or wells drilled for 2016 lots. So I know that in our survey on the southwestern corner, near where lot 1 is, if you're looking at the conventional plan, there's a water department manhole. So I did want to kind of, I don't know, put it out there if it was, if a public connection was available or possible even, because I know it's something that we did want to explore for the reasons that, it does say in the code that subdivisions need to have public connections, and we do want to encourage that as much as possible. So I didn't know if any, the building department or anyone would have any records as to the possibility of that kind of connection for this.
I can double check the availability again for you. I did look at whether or not it was considered within the consolidated water and sewer areas. This parcel is not. I don't believe that there is the availability, but again, I'll double check.
Okay.
Isn't that, Natalie, I think that's where the water main for Palm Tree runs up Seven Springs, doesn't it? So I'm wondering if that's what that manhole is for.
That's quite possible, yes. So we'll look into it.
And
Can we get a map with the proposed septic systems and wells would be located on each one of these lots?
So is that required for the conventional plan? Is the board going to need individual septic and well locations for the conventional plan? Because I'm not clear on how in-depth the conventional plan needs to be in order to kind of move forward with it.
I just want to make sure that there's adequate leach fields for the septic system to be absorbed into, and the wells don't conflict with the sewage and so forth.
Yes, Rob, that's a really good point, and I think Rick said it best, that this plan should demonstrate not only constructability, but it should conform to the code requirements and the planning board's requirements as well, and that will require the location of wells and septics be confirmed not only just by testing, but location and required separation distances. So all that should definitely be included with your revisions.
Okay, all right, so yeah, it'll be added to the conventional plan on our next submission. We'll make sure, we didn't have too much of an issue with the cluster plan, and those lots are half the size. So, I don't imagine that it'll be, of course, it's not gonna be perfect. It is a, as people have been pointing out, it's a steep site in some places, so it's not, it's all said and done, but yeah, we'll definitely add it. Sure.
I hope I didn't miss anything. I sneezed before and then all my sound went out. And I had to go get these headsets and plug them in because I lost all sound after I sneezed.
That's okay. We were just so
Everything's approved.
Actually, I heard you were going to do a balloon test for each lot for us, David.
My reputation precedes me. Okay. Now listen, I didn't have Winnie the Pooh and Tigger with me, and their red balloons. So what can
We're
I
actually a SpongeBob SquarePants group. So if you could, work up those balloons, those would be great. Sorry, I watched the meeting. I was waiting for a chance to throw that out.
No good deed goes unpunished, right? Nobody would do it. I tried to step up to the plate, and that was a disaster. So, anyway.
Sorry.
Unbelievable.
All in good fun.
Oh, yeah. We gave it a try. Yeah. At least I could add that to my resume. I tried to do a red balloon test. So.
Sorry.
On that note, I think I want to go hide. But
I know we have a couple takeaways for our consultants. We have, some code things we have to figure out. You guys have some takeaways, some feedback from us. I really don't know how much other feedback we can provide right now until we get those two sections of the code away, right?
Yeah, well, and I can provide some guidance, and if it's clear, I can, I guess with Chris's approval, if the planning board is fine, I can send it to the applicant to give them that guidance.
Thank you.
I think that what really is next is after they get that guidance on the cul-de-sacs and the connectivity, is exactly what's done in every other subdivision application, is that the applicant comes back with something they think the planning board would like better than what they did the first time. And then you can react to that. And then, they can consider all these things, can try to anticipate some other comments you may have and come back with a plan for you to react to.
I had one last comment I wanted to ask the board about, just kind of starting the conversation as well, because I think in both letters, the issue was raised on the possibility of a recreation area, because there's a code that says that not less than 10% of the area should be reserved for parks and playgrounds unless the planning board determines it is impractical. And we can have a parkland fee in lieu of not having one. So, the board can render it impractical, but that was another one of those things where, is that also required in the conventional plan, or can we understand that it's going to be replaced? Also, 10% of this lot is 5 acres. Is 5 acres required for, I don't know if 5 acres can be, reserved for a parkland. I don't know if that's feasible given the scope and slopes of the site. And then also, lastly, I think it's a great idea to propose one, but in the cluster development, would we be able to use the conservation easement land for that parkland area as well, or would that have to be separate? So those are all the questions we had about the possibility of adding parkland area. So we just want to broach that.
All right, let me give some general guidance, and then the board can start to weigh in on it tonight or at a future time. And that's It is the board's discretion. It says that that land shall be set aside, but the planning board has the ability to say, well, you know what, it really doesn't make sense to have certainly on this lot, on this property, that size set aside. But they may want to have a small area set aside.
Of
In order to do it, the planning board can give you direction on that. And then what happens is that if what's being proposed ultimately with the guidance of the planning board is not sufficient in the planning board's mind to accommodate the number of units that are being added, not really the number of people, but also it's usually determined on units, then you will get assessed a recreation fee with respect to this for not having sufficient. But the planning board may require you to have some in order, if they believe that it's appropriate for a subdivision of this size, to have some kind of local recreation area.
Sandy, can you remember any subdivisions we've done that on? And I only ask you because you seem to, oh, go ahead, Rick.
No, I was going to say, I don't recall any,
Yeah.
but this board has gone off in different areas and different paths than prior planning boards. So I didn't want to presuppose that you would want to follow what was done in the past.
No, I don't.
I was just at a meeting last night in a different community in Warsing, Ellenville area, and they had a 19 lot subdivision they just approved, and the developer did not do 10% because it was a 148 acre site, but they put in a 1 acre playground that was right by the road, and the people who lived there could walk to it, and then a greatly reduced payment in lieu recreation fee, given that they were providing a small play area, and they worked that all out. It took a while to come up with something, but I think that happens typically.
Does our code give us any discretion to reduce that
Yes.
number?
Yes, and then if I may offer too some input on that, I did discuss this with Dennis also. He had mentioned, competition with some of the other parks in the village, could be something that the board would consider, whether or not this park makes sense, and then also, maintenance of these facilities and things like that. So just more for you to digest and for applicability in this particular instance.
And one final thing that I think will help put some guidance for your own thoughts as to how much and whether to require anything is that although it's gauged on the number of lots in this particular subdivision that would be authorized, it's not just for the subdivision. All right. So it has to be a public area that would have to be offered
Accessible.
if you required it. And it would have to be open to the public. So you may want to take that into consideration as well as to whether or not you want a small one or maybe not have any at all.
And if we have none at all, then they have to pay parkland fees.
They would have to pay parkland fees regardless if it is not adequate. And although Jonathan talked about giving a credit isn't required, although it really depends upon the Board of Trustees and how they set up the fee system. So we would have to go ahead and work on that. But it may be possible to have a reduction in those per lot, or it may be that if it's a relatively small area that's being proposed, that it really doesn't impact the additional demand that would be being put on other parkland areas in the village, and therefore they would have to pay the full freight of a recreation fee. And it's the planning board only that gets to assess the planning board, the recreation fee, depending upon a test that I can discuss with you at a future date when it's more relevant.
Well,
Thanks.
for me, off the cuff, I like small community parks. I grew up around them. I think it's good. I think it's good in neighborhoods. I know we do have two, one very large park in Woodbury and another smaller one, but I don't know. I think there's something to be said about living in a small subdivision and, being able to send your kids down the block to go.
But it has to be open to the public. So that kind of defeats the purpose.
Yes,
No,
it does.
Yeah, it has to be open to the public, but there's lots of small pocket parks that are in various subdivisions that are open to the public, but either the applicant, if it's a large enough subdivision, maintains it, or if they offer it for dedication to the village may want a pocket park in that area because they think it's a good idea, or it's the start of building of a string of parks that they have it as far as a long-term vision.
It's something we don't have to come up with tonight, right?
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
I just wanted to open the discourse.
I think it's something for everybody to think about. Maybe sleep. Sorry.
Can I say something about clustering?
Sure.
Yeah. I was looking up about clustering. It's really an old concept from medieval times. And then the early part of our history, farm communities would sometimes build close together, but they would have a common ground that they would have their cattle graze in. So I think that concept, if you're going to have a clustering housing situation, you should have a common ground for the people to enjoy for recreation, for walking, whatever the purpose is. So I think that's a key part of a cluster development.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with what you. Like I said, when I grew up on Long Island, the communities were small and had small, areas, common areas for everybody to gather in, and I think it brings everybody together. But I think it's something for everybody to kind of sleep on and think about, and bring back.
Someone is, right?
Someone's doing that earlier than others. But it may be appropriate for the applicant to incorporate that into its conventional plan now to some degree,
Sure.
and allow the planning board to react to it.
Yeah, can you do that, David? It's not put and we're not asking for like a massive water park, some swings and slides and, you
Sure.
would see. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Anything else from the applicants or consultants or board members?
Nope.
I do have just one question. I noticed that throughout there was mention of an HOA. So how does that work with a park like that, Rick? Does that, if there's an HOA involved?
I don't know whether or not an HOA is really going to be workable for a community of only 20 homes or less. It's difficult for an HOA to really work efficiently, but I mean, it can be done. And rather than the village taking it over, it could be an HOA that manages the public park.
Okay. All right.
Anything else? Okay.
No.
All right. Well, thank you guys for your time. So we'll look forward to your next submission. And Rick, when you get guidance on those two laws, I think, is the board okay with Rick setting that guidance over without having the applicant have to come back? And
Yes.
Yes, of course.
Hey, should I pass it by you first, Chris?
yeah, just run it through we'll run it, see.
Okay.
Look. All right.
All right.
Thank you very much,
Will do.
guys, for your time tonight.
It was a pleasure meeting everyone.
All right,
Look forward
thank
to
you.
working with you all. And it's nice to put a face to a name, Natalie, to meet her. And well, Rick, I've known for a while, so look forward to working with
Natalie
you.
has a much better face than Rick.
That's not true.
Have
Oh,
a
wow.
good evening.
Everybody have a good evening.
All right, thank you.
Take care. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, pick two.
I have one other thing for the planning board. Paul and David, you could excuse yourselves if you would like. This
You
is
got it. Thanks.
into your application.
Sorry, I forgot you did have something else.
Yeah, I apologize. I feel like I'm always doing this to you guys. So really quick, the Timber Trail subdivision, it's an 8-lot subdivision that was approved in 2008. It was put on hold and then resurrected a couple years ago. At this time, the developer is proceeding with roadway and utility construction, and they've encountered a request by Orange and Rockland to install their utilities in an area where your formerly approved snow easement was located. And also they're requesting a change to, I believe it was 3 water services and 2 footing drains that were shown on their original plan. All of these changes are associated with the O&R utility requests. We did review this with the highway department. They took no exception to the relocation of that easement. And we also reviewed it for any conflicts with driveways or other site features. But ultimately, we're presenting it to you as a potential field change. In our opinion, it could be handled that way if you agree. I don't know. I know Chris had a copy of the plan. I'm not sure that everybody in the board did get it. If I could.
Natalie,
Yes.
This is Susan Shapiro?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay. I recused myself from that application, so I don't have anything to say on it.
You're still not leaving.
But I recused myself, so I'm not weighing in.
You want to share your screen, Natalie? I gave you permission.
Okay, great. Let me see.
Ah.
All right, it's just taking a second to load.
You were doing your Christmas shopping, weren't you, Natalie? You had Amazon open on your own.
No, actually, I'm pretty far along with my Christmas shopping. I'm impressed with myself this year. But now I can't find the proper window. Hold on one second.
No pressure.
None at all.
Rick only bills by the second.
Okay, does everybody see
I'm
it?
not building on this one, so it's maybe I should go to sleep.
Can you see the plan?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can see.
Okay, great. So where my mouse is, and I'm not sure if there's any delay for you guys, but this gray location here was the approved snow easement, and they're shifting that, I believe it was west, to accommodate this pull box by O&R. That's the first thing that they're requesting. The second is to relocate these footing drains here. The original are the dotted lines in gray. And then the final request, so you could see they're really not that far off from the original proposition. And then the water service lines are here in gray, and the blue is what's proposed now. That's 1, 2, and then the third is here.
And that snow, the only question I had was that snow easement isn't in front of a driveway? Because I don't see the driveways on here.
The driveways, we did check that. It is not. The driveway for this dwelling is here.
Okay.
And then the other one is here. And we also checked the drainage pattern. The snow melt from this new snow easement would go into this catch basin here, so you shouldn't have any issues with ice development.
Okay. Well, I'm good with it. Tommy?
Yeah, I'm fine.
I'm good.
And then since Rick, you're here, I know you're not charging anything to this. Well, is there any special mechanism for this relocation of easement aside from, I think it probably has already been filed. I just want to be able to provide them with some direction, next steps.
You're muted.
Still muted.
Thank you, Tommy. Yes, they would have to file an amended easement with the new property description
Okay.
and indicate that it is they can file an amended one noting that it's superseding the prior one. There's lots of different ways to do it, but their lawyers can go ahead and do that. And it should be passed by our office just so that we can make sure that it's proper so that the village, when it's plowing, knows where it should be going and it's protected.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything else, anybody? All right, motion to close?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, everybody get a good night's rest. I'll see you.
Good night. Good night.
Good night, all.
Can't make it up.